What's up, it's your girl Kiya.
And this is her brother Jalen.
Alright, so in this channel what we do is we go over various topics of Avatar: The Last Airbender and Legend of Korra. So basically what we will be doing is going over different topics, having certain discussions. We're both huge fans of the show. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about, on this channel, we're just going to be going over those topics. So if you're a fan, definitely going to want to subscribe. It's our first video. On my vlogging channel, if you guys want to check that out, I did a video on an update of the live action that the original creators have left Netflix and collaborating on that. So if you haven't heard the news, if you haven't seen the videos on it, definitely check that video out. Okay,
we'll leave that below in the description.
Yeah, that'll be linked in the description, you guys. So today what we'll be talking about is Legend of Korra. So we're going to be talking about the parenting that we've seen of both Aang and Katara in that series, and basically a lot of people have been very upset about it. A lot of people didn't like the fact that it seemed like they were making them bad parents, and so we wanted to address that because it's something that I personally was upset about too. Alright, so basically I found an article a couple months ago talking about it. Okay, so basically they were saying that it was inconsistent because it didn't match up with their characteristics that we've seen in Avatarthelastairbender. Because what we've seen in Avatarthelastairbender is that they're both people that believe in equality, they believe in the world being fair, and they believe in making everything just so that people can live peacefully. Now that didn't really match up with their parenting skills, seeing how divided their children were and how they're kind of bickering back and forth. It just didn't seem like the type of family dynamic we would have imagined seeing from both of them. So that was something that I noticed, and I agree with. I agree with that part as far as it seems like there's an inconsistency at first, but I'll explain why. I'll explain why it may seem that way.
I don't agree.
You don't agree with what?
I don't agree because anytime you look at any time in the history of Avatar, in all the books, is always talking about bringing balance to the earth, but it's not talking about bringing balance to the earth between benders and non-benders. It's talking about bringing balance to the earth amongst benders.
Right.
And that's something that Sokka brought to light in one of the books that was written as an extension of Avatar: The Last Airbender, where he felt like there was inequality between benders and non-benders. And it was the same thing for him with being in the group of Team Avatar. He felt like there wasn't that balance between benders and non-benders. Even when you look at the council, there was more benders on the council than there was non-benders. So it's sort of a situation where, in a sense, you could see where Aang is coming from in the first season of Legend of Korra, because Sokka brought up those same issues. So you would have thought that Sokka was, in a sense, in that book, sort of the founder of the equalist movement, where it was like, okay, well, I'm not being treated equally because I'm not a bender. And it was true. The benders sort of dominated society in that time, and they've really always dominated society. So for Korra and Aang to be pushing equality, they weren't necessarily pushing equality amongst benders and non-benders. It was equality amongst benders themselves. Right. So it's sort of a situation where you have the writers of the Declaration of Independence. They say, oh, all men are created equal. But it wasn't speaking of all men, not all races. It was speaking of all legitimately only men, only men, and those men have to be white. It was specific to a sect of people, not to everyone in general. So I felt like that was, and so when you look at the situation between, you know, Korra and Aang as it pertains to their children, their whole ideology is flawed. So even if their ideology is flawed of what they're pushing and throughout the earth at that time, in this specific show, if their ideology is flawed, then obviously their parenting as it pertains to multiple children will be flawed as well. Yeah,
I think that that also goes with kind of the fact that, you know, nobody's really perfect. Sometimes you just miss the mark, and I feel like for Aang, between Aang and Korra as avatars, I feel like for Aang it was bringing the benders together. For for Korra, for her it was bringing everyone together. So it was bringing the benders and non-benders together, which I feel like was very important because the non-benders were definitely overlooked for sure.
I mean, even then, you look at the character of Sokka. A lot of people think Sokka is trash. Among Avatar watchers, they think Sokka is trash. Sokka was a great strategist. He was great in hand-to-hand combat when it comes to weapons. But because he wasn't a bender, people don't look at him as important.
Yeah.
People don't see him as an important
He's
character
actually
because
saved
he wasn't
them
a bender.
many times.
So,
like without Sokka in a lot of instances, he was the navigator. He made sure they got where they needed to go. He scheduled everything. He was a strategist. So I really love Sokka. And I feel like they definitely would have had a harder time with had he not been there.
And it pertains to us as watchers as well.
Yeah.
There's a misjudgment or inequality amongst Avatar people who like Avatar as well, because we also see benders as more important characters than non-benders. So we see it the same way. So it's not like why would we see it any different than how the show actually displays it.
Right. All right. So back to the article, basically the conclusion is that they felt like because they were pushing this on society, they didn't really push it on their own family. So they're so busy trying to fix the world that they neglected their own family. So that's basically what the conclusion was. And
I think that's a central thing throughout, not only throughout Avatar. That's why I think what makes this particular part of the storyline so realistic. Because the fact of the matter is that when you look at any person in leadership, they usually don't make great parents for that reason.
Right.
There's never been a case where you look. There's very few cases where you look at a person who's doing something as as grand of a scale as Aang and Korra were doing it and turned out to be great parents. Especially with the fact that not only were they trying to save the world, but they also didn't have an example of what great parents were. Aang didn't have parents. He had a close friend in Monk Gyatso, but he didn't have a parent. And monks don't make good parents because usually they aren't parents. So Aang didn't have an example of what a good parent should look like. And Katara, she always played a motherly role, but she didn't have her mother for the majority of her life. Her dad was absent for a big part of her life. So she, in a sense, didn't have an example. She had grand, but that's not like a parent. You understand what I'm saying? She was taught how to be a mother, which is why that's what she was throughout the show. So she had some level, but you're living in a different time. You have a totally different mission. She understands so obviously that takes a lot of time and precedence and different things like that. But none of them were really taught how to be parents. Toph ran away. Sokka didn't really, have that. So I didn't expect them. In real life, I wouldn't expect them to be good parents. I mean, I would expect them to do their best, which I'm sure they did, especially Aang did his best. Korra did his best. But since, I could see how Bumi would be left out because Bumi isn't a bender. And like I said, their idea of equality was equality amongst benders. It had nothing to do with non-benders.
Right.
So I could see how those issues would arise, but I don't think there was a fundamental issue of them being straight up bad parents. I just think they made some bad decisions as parents. I think there's a complete difference between the two.
Right. I also agree. I think it just goes with people not being perfect. Nobody's ever perfect. There's some things you just don't do right, and I feel like that's what makes it such a great. I think that the connection that we have with the show and with the series is the fact that we can connect with it on that level. And I think for us, when we watch it, we often think, oh, they can't, of course they're going to be perfect parents, they're going to be this, they're going to be that, but realistically we know that even living our lives, we know that we make mistakes. Our parents make mistakes. We're going to make mistakes eventually when we decide to have our own families. So I think it wasn't really fair for a lot of people to think that they would be perfect parents. I just think for a lot of people, they just felt that it was out of character. But I don't think it's out of character. You have to look at their history as individuals as well. And like he already addressed, Aang he didn't grow up with the original family dynamic that a lot of people grew up with. So you have to keep that in consideration as well. And I feel like it's also important for us to note that Aang himself was he was singled out by the monks. And if you look at it, Aang did single out Tenzin from the rest of his siblings. Why was that? Because he was important. It's different if there would already been airbenders already there. But even for Aang growing up, he was an avatar. There's certain responsibilities he had to, there's certain things he had to do. He had to learn. So he wasn't really able to do everything everybody else was able to do. It's kind of the same with Tenzin. So you have to look at how Aang was brought up and how it's important for Tenzin to know this information. He'll be after Aang was gone, he will have a family of his own and potentially have airbenders as his children. So in order to pass down that history, it was important for him to teach Tenzin those things because the next avatar would need him. So I think that was something that he was keeping in mind. So although it might not have been the best method, of course I was thinking, well, even if that's the case, wouldn't it have been okay for him to at least have the other siblings there? But in my theory would be the fact that he didn't want them carrying that burden as well, because it would be a burden for Tenzin. Notice, like, without Tenzin, Korra would not have been able to stand a chance against a lot of the issues that came up.
You're right. I haven't been spending enough time with them. I wish I could be as good a father as Dad was to us.
Tenzin, your problem is you're exactly like Dad. He was so focused on saving the world and doing his duty, don't laugh, that he never had time for us.
Dad was under a lot of pressure.
He always had time for you, though. His precious little airbender.
Dad loved us all equally. Besides, it all happened a long time ago. Why are we even talking about this?
Because you seem to have some grandiose delusion that we had a perfect, happy-go-lucky childhood. Guess what? We didn't.
We need to keep moving if we want to find Ikki before dark.
That's on a small level, but understanding the fact that Tenzin being the only airbender of all those children, keep in mind that the Avatar's lineage has to continue.
Exactly.
So after Aang, there's Korra, and then after Korra, there's an Earthbender, and then after Earthbender, there's a Firebender, and there needs to be an Airbender there to come after it to be Avatar as well. So that needs to continue. I think people forget, not only, first of all, Aang, Korra, Toph, and Sokka's decision was flawed inside. Their decision making was flawed in Avatar: The Last Airbender. Right. So they weren't perfect in Avatar: The Last Airbender. So for you for a person to assume that they would be perfect, that their decision making wouldn't be flawed from that point on, doesn't make sense either. It's not like their decision making was perfect in that show. Right. But Aang being more spiritually, being more in touch with the spirit world. Because he was a monk, he not only did he have a responsibility to Tenzin in specific, but he had a responsibility for the air nomads long after that. This is something that needs because I'm pretty sure Aang had the idea of how young he would die. I'm pretty sure he knew he would die younger because he spent all of that time in the iceberg. So I'm pretty sure with that understanding, it was necessary for him to teach Tenzin everything that he taught him, because even more importantly, the Avatar lineage won't stop. Right. And if it doesn't stop, that means that it needs to get to an air nomad. So it's important for the Avatar's lineage that not only that there be a culture among the air nomads, but there actually be air nomads.
Yeah, so there was an urgency for it. There was an urgency of why he needed to teach him all that information, all that history throughout that time, because he wasn't gonna be able to live forever. Tenzin was gonna have to take that up. So I feel like people should definitely take that in consideration. Also, the fact that why he didn't bring the other siblings along, because that's a lot to have to carry. So he probably just wanted his other children to be able to live their lives in a pretty normal life. Tenzin, he didn't really have a normal life. Of course, he loved his life and how he lived it, how he grew up. But for the other siblings, they had more of an opportunity to actually live their lives the way that they wanted to.
And I'm pretty sure that because to think that Aang and Katara were bad parents altogether, I don't think it's fair either, because Tenzin turned out to be an excellent father, and he had an excellent relationship with his mother. It's not like he only had a relationship with Aang. And so clearly he had a good father showing him how he should be. He had a good mother that he had a really good relationship with. There wasn't any kind of animosity or anything in Legend of Korra between he and Korra. So obviously they did right in some areas. I think on the side of parenthood, I think Aang probably takes most of the hit because he focused on Tenzin so much. But that doesn't overall make him a bad father. He did very well with Tenzin. Tenzin's a great father and a great husband. And a great mentor. So I can't say altogether that Aang was a bad father, because that's not exactly the example that he left.
Right. Yeah. So I think there's a reason behind everything. And I like that the creators made sure that they incorporated that in the storyline, because I feel like it's important for people to gather all that information. I feel like a lot of people miss that, but that's the reason why we're talking about it now, because it's a really good topic to discuss, especially with Legend of Korra being on Netflix now. So a lot of people are going to be watching it, especially after watching Avatar: The Last Airbender. So that might be something that you observe throughout the series. So if you have something you have something that you've observed as well, definitely drop it in the comment section below. It'll definitely be cool to have that dialogue going on. I think that
Legend of Korra did a really good. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of Legend of Korra, but I think what they did a really good job of is making the conflicts make sense. And those conflicts leading, like for example, if they had made everything perfect and right with everyone, everything right with everyone at the end and in between the stories of Avatar: The Last Airbender and Legend of Korra, there would have been you have to create issues,
right?
But if you allow a more realistic storyline, now you have a more real conflict,
right?
And in that first season, a lot of people don't respect that first season, but
we're definitely going to go into that in another video, so definitely stick around for that, because we're definitely going to be going over all these type of topics, you guys. So if you have anything you want us to discuss, definitely put it in the comments as well. Another thing I wanted to mention is that there was a lot of responsibility. I think we might have already gone over that, but they had a lot of responsibility. Not only were they raising a family, Aang had to make sure Tenzin was learning all this history. On top of that, also trying to get everybody else in order, because notice if you read the comic books, there's a lot of stuff going on. That doesn't mean just because they defeated the Fire Lord, that didn't mean that they didn't have other people that they had to deal with. That doesn't mean that there were other conflicts that they had to resolve. They had to do a lot of other things, so they had a lot of stuff on their plate. And as far as I can say about Katara, he already basically went over how she grew up, which is actually very important to talk about. The fact that they all didn't really grow up with that firm, family dynamic, except for really Toph. But we'll go over that in the next video. Guys, we'll be talking about Toph.
Zuko didn't have his mother his whole life, but he had Iroh, so he had less of an excuse than really all of the rest of them. He had Iroh for pretty much his whole life.
Yeah. So for Katara, I felt like seeing how Katara is, we all know that Katara is not the type to be submissive, which we see throughout the series, and definitely Asian culture a lot of times, in a lot of different cultures, of the woman being submissive. But with Katara, we've seen, majority of them, we see that Katara has always been the type to make a stand regardless. Like, she does not care. That's what I really admire about Katara, is that she fights for what she knows or what she feels is right. And we saw that in the first season of Avatar, when they went to the Northern Air Temple. So that was something that definitely, for sure, that's just how she is. So when you put two and two together, it's just like, well, why wouldn't she address this issue with Aang? And I feel like there's such a big gap between the two series that it's just kind of hard to really say that she didn't. Maybe this was something that they were trying to fix. And it may seem like she didn't really try to fix it, because in Legend of Korra, you can see them bicker and she says nothing. But in my theory, I think she's just at an old age, and they're grown adults. They can resolve this issue on their own. I think for her, she knows that they're going to resolve it, but she probably spent so much time trying to resolve the issue between the siblings that she was just like, you guys are grown enough to fix this issue yourself.
And this also could be an issue of her, like you said, she's always bucked the system as far as how that goes.
Right.
And maybe she was trying to, and maybe as being a mother, she didn't want to be the stereotype of what a mother was at that time. So you could say that she rejected that responsibility. And to show, listen, like, I'm not a housewife. I'm not your traditional mother as to what the mold fits now. So that could be a reason why those issues were the way that they were, and why her relationship with the way she addressed her kids and different things like that was the way that it was, because a traditional mother would address those things, but her being throughout the series being a person who bucked the system, who doesn't want to be a traditional housewife, who doesn't want to be the motherly type. Because keep in mind, during Avatar: The Last Airbender, she rejected that title. She didn't like being called mom, being like a mother figure. She was, but she didn't like that idea. Remember,
right?
You're always acting like a mom. Like she had a problem with that, with being given that sort of what do you call it, like title or banners, just like the sticker put on her head, like, yeah, you're the mom of the group. She didn't like that. So for people to think that would change when she actually became a mother doesn't make sense either.
Yeah, we kind of seen that in episode with Katara and Toph when they're going back and forth, and then they're able to resolve it in the end. So you kind of see that she always kind of battled with that, having that title, not really wanting it, but then it's just that's just the type of person that she was. So she didn't really like that title, but you know, that's just how it was. So another thing is that she understood being with Aang. She understood the importance of the air, like having Airbender as her child and bringing forth that. Like, she understood how important it was.
There's a chance she supported it.
Yeah, there's a chance that she supported it because Katara, like, she probably understood the sacrifices that would need to happen in order for them to make sure that things go the way that they needed to, because it was necessary. Whether we like to think about it or not, it was definitely necessary for them to probably raise their children like that. Like, of course, probably the only thing they could really do, like I said, is have the other two siblings there, but like with them when they're on those. Because notice, I think they addressed it in the series where is that when Kiya and Bumi were talking to Tenzin. Tenzin was just like, he thought that they had been there. He was like, don't you remember this? Don't you remember that? They're like, we were never there. So I think for them, they wanted to be there, but it just seemed like they're always left out. Like, you're the one that was important. We weren't really that important. Like, you don't remember that we weren't even there type thing. So for Tenzin, he never understood why there was an issue, because in his mind, it's like, we're all treated equal. I was never the favorite, you know, things like that. So, but for them, it was just like, no, we were never ever there. And I think that kind of helped them to mend their relationship a little bit more, because he realized, okay, yeah, I was treated different.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And we all know why it was necessary for them to be raised like that. I just don't think that they wanted the other two siblings to have that pressure. And I don't think they really understood it at the time, which they probably didn't. They weren't really, of course, they know that Aang was the last one, but they probably didn't understand the severity of Tenzin learning those things.
And I don't think that the sort of, I don't think that it should be Tenzin or Kiya that's pitied in this situation. I think it should be Bumi, because Bumi, no matter what, if Aang had been home or not, or he had taken them along or not, he still would have had a sense of separation from them, because Aang's a bender, Katara's a bender, and two of their kids are benders, and he's not. So he's clearly on the outside of all of this. He can't learn anything from any of that stuff. He can't say, oh yeah, I can watch you do a bending form and then copy it and do it. He can't do that.
Yeah.
So they can't just go and say, hey, let's teach you a bending form. He can't. So he doesn't have that same relationship as they did. So he's sort of stuck in the middle. Tenzin's out with Aang doing this. Katara's here with Kiya teaching her water bending. Whereas he's just sort of floating out there in the middle. Doesn't really have any kind of. He probably had less of a relationship with Korra and Aang than either of them.
Right.
So to make it seem as though, oh yeah, Kiya suffered, or oh, Tenzin suffered. No, it's Bumi who really suffered in this whole situation. Of any of the Team Avatar's children, he probably suffered the worst.
And I have to say, you have to remember that Bumi is the oldest, and then Kiya is the second, then Tenzin's youngest. You can tell Tenzin's the youngest when he started whining to Katara when they started bickering as adults. So I think that's definitely that's something that I noticed as well. Is just the fact that, you know, Bumi's the oldest, Kiya's the second oldest, then Tenzin comes, who ends up being an airbender, just realizing how their lives change after that. Just imagine the change that happens when you find out that your sibling has this airbending ability that is so important, and then all of a sudden everything starts to change. So for them, they have a lot of resentment towards Tenzin. They seem to have a bit of resentment towards Aang as well. And it's just like one of those things that was really resolved because Aang passed away. So
and I'm pretty sure Korra probably had the same feelings that Aang did having the airbender, because think about it, both their first child was a non-bender. So they could be thinking, well, we might not have any benders. Well, the first child was a non-bender. We're most likely not going to have an airbender. We could have a waterbender, right? So second child comes, is Kiya, right? Korra probably felt the same way about Kiya. Like, listen, I had a non-bender for my first child, but now I got a waterbender. I got to teach her everything I know, right? So, and it was probably most likely the same thing. It was the same thing for Aang when Tenzin was born. So you can't necessarily say that that Korra isn't at fault. I believe that was probably something that happened, because for a parent, for any parent, that's something that could take place. You understand what I'm saying? Oh well, you know, you had all of these type kids, but this one is interested in what I like. You know, we had our first kid. I'm a scientist. I'm a doctor, and you're a lawyer. You're a lawyer, and I'm a doctor. The first child isn't interested in either. He wants to be a race car driver, but the second kid wants to be a lawyer. It's like, oh, let me teach you what I know about wanting to be a lawyer. And the third child is a doctor. And say there's a shortage on doctors in there. There are not very many doctors. It's like, listen, I got to teach this kid everything I know about being a doctor. What happens to the first child who wanted to be a race car driver?
True.
You see what I'm saying? It's natural even in today's world for something like that to happen. So I think that's just sort of showing the intricacy and the detail that was placed into the storylines by the creators. And
it definitely made me appreciate Legend of Korra more, because I'm not gonna lie, the first time the show came out, I couldn't even really finish it. It was just so disappointing to me to see like the large gap between it. It was just like, first of all, I'm trying to process the fact that Aang's dead. Then I'm trying to process the fact that there's so many, like, I was hoping I would get a lot of answers, like a lot of the questions I had answered, and I didn't really get that. But watching a second time, there was a lot of stuff in it that I really did appreciate, and that was one of the things that I had an issue with at first until I started to understand it, and I was just like, okay, yeah, all right, so this show isn't like too bad, you know. I like the fact that they put that in series. So that kind of brings us into the conclusion, which is the fact that this is actually not a bad thing. It kind of, I feel like it brings it definitely makes the show more special in a way. Like, we all have a connection. A lot of us who are fans, we definitely have that connection with the show. It's just like, it's because you can relate to it. And I feel like adding that in there, it makes it like more relatable to us, because we know our families are not perfect. You know, things like that. It just makes you understand. Like, it makes it relatable to you. Basically, what I'm saying.
Makes it make more sense. Whether people like how they were portrayed or not, nobody can say that it's not a realistic outcome.
Right.
And nobody can say that it isn't an outcome that had a really good effect on the show, as far as how the characters are developed and the consistencies and the development of the characters. Because if Aang and Korra were perfect characters, where's the development? Where's the change among Bumi, Tenzin, and Kiya throughout the Legend of Korra? Because they developed as well. It's not like they were, oh, Tenzin was Tenzin throughout the whole show. He changed as well.
Yeah.
All of it developed. So without that conflict, or without those issues that happen with Aang, Korra, and their children, then now you have you have them as flat characters. They're just sort of the same inconsistent character throughout the show. So I think that really helped the show in the storyline and how the characters developed and the intricacy of each character and being able to identify and relate to each character. Yeah, it definitely helped the show.
Yeah, it makes you like really connect the characters, because you actually start seeing the siblings start coming together. You start seeing them develop more, and it's just like, wow, like, dang, okay, I see why now. So it definitely makes you appreciate it more. I definitely would say that. Yeah. So guys, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Definitely like, comment, share, and subscribe. Don't forget to comment down below. And if you are currently watching Legend of Korra on Netflix now, because it is on there now, guys. This is put on there, I think, about a day or two ago. So definitely check that out. If you have anything you want us to talk about, put in the comments. Or if you want to add to what we've already been talking about, just add that too. And we'll most likely we'll definitely address this topic again and bring up a lot of what you guys think as well. And we'll definitely discuss that. So if you guys are interested in that, definitely do that. And thank you guys for watching for sure.
Hit the like button.
Hit the like button, y'all.